that Mike is going to give me a number on how many chickens I can have in my backyard. No, that's not going to happen, because I don't know. And that's been an ongoing question of discussion as well. How many is approved here, how many is approved there? It really comes down to management. I mean, one farm might be able to have, you know, a density of, you know, 10 chickens per acre, or another might have 50 chickens per acre. It all depends a little bit. So we're in the ongoing process of coming up with some guidelines for what I'm going to call home animal agriculture, and those guidelines have changed already, and you can get copies of them somewhere. Doug took copies of them.
I have.
Doug has copies of those, so you'll be able to get kind of the latest where we're at on determining those. Okay, what can we call residential animal agriculture? The activity of producing domesticated animals or their products for home use or consumption, including breeding, growing, carrying, housing, and product preparation for sale. You know, that sounds like a good definition. Any comments on that? Does that kind of meet where you think you're at with people in terms of backyard agriculture or residential agriculture? Ray, is that kind of?
Yeah, I'd say so.
More or less.
Maybe, except for maybe the part about for sale. I don't think the people that we're talking about are going to sell stuff. You know what I mean? They're using it for themselves.
So maybe we could qualify that a little bit and say, yeah. But sale could still be a possibility.
Oh yeah, it could be. But I'm just saying, from what I know, most of them are using it themselves.
Okay, the best management practices explained in this document that you're going to get from Doug kind of represent the best judgment of the experiment station, SEBS, Schools of Environmental and Biological Sciences, and other people who might be involved in the issue. Well, what are some things that we're going to be looking at? Well, animal units is always a concern. How many units do we have? And in a little bit, I'll give you a little bit of a formula how you might determine animal units on a farm. And of course, animal density, how many animals you have per acre. What about environmental stresses? You know, different places are going to have more of a stress on than others are. If you've got streams near your backyard where you want to have your chickens, that's going to be a concern, as another place might not be such a concern. Generally, it's recommended there's a certain easement given between animals and streams, animals and property lines, animals and other structures. Waste management, how do you dispose of your waste? And we'll spend a little more time talking about that, appropriate ways. The state has some very clear guidelines about how animal waste has to be managed within the state of New Jersey. And certainly you still have to abide by those rules, but obviously if you've got a small number of animals in a backyard or kind of a residential situation, it's going to change things. Animal and human health. I've got a couple of handouts here that talk about animal health. Probably, you know, with avian flu being an issue in the past few years, one of the areas I know that the USDA was concerned about was kind of backyard agriculture. And I'm not sure how it would be in this particular area, but some parts of the state there's concern about the bird markets. You familiar with the bird markets? The live bird markets? And there's concern about, I don't know if you have any in Burlington County, but
Philadelphia
does, Camden does, Newark does, of course New York City has lots of them. So there's always concern about it.
Actually, Mike, no, they do have one down in Tabernacle, I believe it is, don't they, Steve? The auction thing there.
Yeah.
They sell live chickens all the time.
They do.
So, and quite possibly people who might have birds in your backyard might be getting them from that.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
They might be. So, safety. Land carrying capacity, kind of back to that. Aesthetics. I'm sure you've all seen some areas where you wouldn't want people to, you know, out amongst the old chivies and people raising birds or animals in that kind of setting. Animals are going to have shelter and confinement needs. And of course, this is why we're here tonight to talk about as you try to develop your own ordinance, how that's going to go. Okay, I want to start about talking about waste management. And these are straight out of the state's requirements for animal waste management. And we'll just go through them, and then I'll talk to you a little bit later, a little bit more about how they might adapt that to poultry or to backyard agriculture. So this is something that the biggest dairy farms in the state and the smallest poultry farms have to abide by. Animal agricultural operations shall not allow animals in confined areas to have uncontrolled access to waters of the state. What's that mean? It means if you have a feedlot, it refers to a feedlot. It doesn't refer to pasture, it refers to a feedlot. If you have a stream running through your feedlot, you can't do that. Manure storage areas shall be located at least 100 linear feet from waters of the state. So if you have a manure storage place, it needs to be at least 100 feet from water, from the stream. Land application of animal waste shall be performed in accordance with the principles of the New Jersey Department of Ag Best Management Practices Manual. What's that mean? It means you have to have a plan for spreading and disposal of your waste. If you're going to spread it on your land, you should spread it with some plan whereby you're going to do it. You're assuming there's some sort of uptake of nutrients. Now the last two are, might involve veterinary help. Dead animals and related animal waste resulting from a reportable contagious disease or an act of bioterrorism shall not be disposed of without first contacting the state veterinarian. I don't know how you really enforce that maybe, but it is, when a bird dies on a farm, you know, there's a concern. I mean, what was the reason for its dying? And if there's any kind of concern that a person might have, then they should definitely report that to the appropriate authorities or veterinarian. And finally, any person entering a farm to conduct official business related to these rules shall follow biosecurity protocol. What's that mean? You know, there's a handout here on biosecurity. It means that you don't bring germs from the outside in and you don't bring germs from the inside out. That's basically what it means. So if you have to, it doesn't mean gown up, don't worry. But it might mean clean your boots off before you go walk around the birds or leave your farm to go somewhere else. Now these are, again, directly from the State Department of Ag, and I talked with, actually talked with Monique Purcell earlier today about this subject, and she said we need to always mention these because that's the basis of how we manage waste. So I tried to make it a little more friendly, those 5 points. The first one was kind of hard to deal with. Animal operations shall not allow animals in confined areas to have uncontrolled access to waters of the state. Basically, no feedlots in the water, basically what that means. Manure storage areas shall be located at least 100 linear feet from waters of the state. Okay, animal waste can be used to fertilize gardens, in this case, flower beds, even lawns, provided it is not overspread or over-applied. Excess waste can be disposed in a dumpster or the regular trash pickup. That's okay. I'm going to say, I know when we throw our cat's litter out, we bag it up and we throw it out. But I know that if you go up into parts of Monmouth County, I think there's some horse farmers, maybe many, who their waste goes directly into the dumpster. So
On the farm?
Pardon me?
They have set dumpster on the farm?
Yeah. Yeah. They have some sort of service that picks it up regularly. So there's no problem putting it in the waste. Just, you know, chicken manure can be kind of stinky if it sits around a while. As other kinds of manure can as well. So, and I'm sure that's one of the questions you all have had about how they would dispose of their waste. So I would make anybody who, again, the question of density we can talk about in a little bit, but anybody who's going to have a few birds, they need to have a plan for their waste. Maybe they've got a compost pile. I think that's a perfect thing people can do. A compost pile. Any of you compost now? Probably some of you do compost. Poultry manure is really high in nitrogen, or relatively high in nitrogen. And if you compost it with some other things, it should make a nice. You should get a nice mulch out of it, which you can use on your lawn, fertilizer gardens, flower beds, etc. And if you have to throw it away, you throw it away in the dumpster. Again, dead animals and related waste. You're going to have to. I'm not really sure how you go about reporting that. Only if someone was really concerned that there's a problem. I know that with the large animal industries, dairy, for example, The only time it'll ever get reported if there's a concern about a neurologic disease, usually. So that'll come. They'll call the vet, the vet will. But for birds, I'm not really sure what reporting mechanism there is. And that's something for me to look into a little more. That when somebody has a problem, what's the reporting mechanism? Other than that, I guess, bag it up, throw it in the dumpster. How's anybody do that? How do you get birds? How do you dispose of your dead ones? You bury them or compost them? Or?
I haven't had any dead ones lately, but yeah, most people that I know of do bury them.
They bury them. They can compost. They can be composted, but you need a fairly, you need not a small area to do that.
Most of the folks that I've talked to that have birds in Tabernacle, they're more like a domestic pet, and composting them isn't something that would ever enter their mind. They bury it and put it next to the dog that died 3 years ago. That's how, and I can understand that. I can recognize that. I think what you're doing though, in going to the bioterrorism piece, I think that's something that has got to be looked at from a global perspective, statewide.
Well, that's why they put it in the rule, so it
makes sense.
can't.
You're not going to set an alarm for one dead bird.
No.
When you have 2 or 3 in a row, then
that might be different.
Right.
Yeah.
That might be different. And finally, the biosecurity protocol again. What I do when I go on farms, sometimes I do when I go on farms. Ray does this all the time. Right. You put on the plastic babies.
Actually, the greenhouse, not far from Gunther's, they do that there.
Oh, really?
Even in the greenhouse.
When I go on farms, not always, but often I'm on a dairy farm, especially. I'll put it
on here.
Well, here's a little, generally speaking, this is kind of an old rule of thumb. Don't combine webfoots and non-webfoots. You heard that rule before? So if you've got webfoots, I don't know how good of a rule, I've heard it from reliable sources anyway, I'm not a poultry guy. If you've got ducks, for the most part, keep them apart from the chickens. No webfoots and non-webfoots. Okay, this is a... Okay, animal units, and here's where, as I mentioned to Doug earlier and a couple of you, that our previous version of the rule actually had numbers in it, how many animals per acre. But we're moving away from that. We don't want to do that for the reason that there might be a problem. I mean, somebody might see those numbers and say that they might have a problem with those numbers. So I think ultimately it's going to come down to the township a little bit, determining what you think is reasonable. I mean, so many animals per acre or so many units per acre. But let me talk about animal units. A tool we sometimes use in a variety of ways is just the animal unit concept, how many animals per acre, how many units per acre. If we've got a 1,000-pound horse on an acre, we would consider that a one unit per acre. So when we had done these numbers earlier, we kind of figured that as our standard. But again, we've kind of taken that standard out now and let each township kind of deal with it on their own, how they're going to do that. The animal unit is related to the carrying capacity of an area of land with respect to environmental health, exercise, and food requirements. It is also useful in determining special requirements for animal housing. Okay, so the document uses 1,000 pounds as a guideline. We aren't establishing strict standards, like, you can only have 10 units per acre, or you can only have 1 unit per acre. Just guidelines that might be useful. Depending on management, a farm could keep more or less animals. I might be able to raise 1,000 chickens in my third of an acre, but nobody's going to let me do that. I mean, that might technically meet the letter of the law, but again, I'm trying to communicate that it's a little bit on how you're all going to do that to come up with those numbers. And what are people thinking in your township about? Is there some? Are you in the residential area, sir? You said you had chickens.
I'm in residential.
You're in residential.
I guess I'm residential farm. I honestly don't know what my,
We're not sure what the whole thing.
yeah,
Well, it's a different, you've got different zones. You've got different zones, but you're residential. You're where you live is residential. And there's been a lot of, well, go ahead, you've got them, so.
Yeah, explain your situation, because you're going to have different categories here, I'm sure. I mean, somebody who's in commercial agriculture.
yeah, exactly. I mean, my neighbors are far enough away where it's not gonna bother them, but yet I know half a mile down the road, the houses are closer together.
Right, right.
I mean, in my particular case, I have a farm across from me, no houses at all. I have a neighbor on either side, and I have thousands of acres of quarry behind me.
So you got no problem.
I have absolutely no problem. My neighbors always wanted me to have, you know, stuff. My one neighbor actually used to have it, and until he gets better shelter for them, he's actually thinking about bringing chickens back also.
So how many birds do you have?
I have 8.
Okay, so you're no problem. You're no problem. So what was kind of the impetus for the municipal rule? What's the impetus for it?
Right now, they're not allowed at all.
Not allowed at all? Okay.
And a lot of municipalities, towns, villages are adopting some sort of an ordinance to be able to allow them in town. And we've heard a lot of different feedback from a lot of different folks about what a normal number is. And they're really educated guesses. There isn't any kind of, you're the kind of resource that we've gone to say, okay.
And I'm not giving you a number.
No, but you're actually giving us a lot of more understanding, a clear understanding about how to write it, because you can't have a certain number just as the state decides you can't have a certain number. It all depends on what the situation is. We've heard nine per acre, or depending on what the lot sizes are.
Mm-hmm.
There could be some proportionate changes depending on how large the lots are.
Sure.
And the committee is in the process of putting that together.
Well, if we went to the 1-to-1 ratio, 1 unit, 1,000-pound unit per acre, then that would mean you could have, if a bird weighs 8 pounds, you could have 250 birds on an acre. And that's
Right.
you're not going to do that.
Right.
You're not
Yeah,
gonna
That'd
do
be a
that.
problem.
So that-
Yeah, and I don't even think the residents would want that. You don't want 250 birds, do
Oh,
you?
hell no.
But on the other hand, if somebody had I'm not sure how you'll frame your rule, but if someone had a cow, a 1,000-pound cow is, you could maintain that on an acre.
Yeah, you could.
Easy.
Yeah, I think the two big things that we're trying to understand is, number one, can we have them? What's the setback need to be? We've already gone through a process for the Land Development Board in terms of making sure we're within the guidelines of the master plan, but the big thing probably is the manure management.
Right.
And how do you do that? And we've already learned some of the options that are available to us. Are there any other specific things we need to understand about manure?
Just a few things. Let me say a little bit about setbacks. I think for manure storage, I think we say 50 feet from the property line. I don't know what you're looking at there, but we say 50 feet from a property line. I think 50 feet from a wellhead. I'd have to look that one up. 100 foot from a stream. That covers most things. Now, one thing that's done in some areas, you might have a municipal place you could bring your waste. You have a municipal composting place?
Right, not a composting, but right next door we have a lot of recycling, which is TVs and cans and that kind of thing. We don't do leaf collection anymore, which I really don't want to talk about.
Right. Well, leaves and poultry manure would be great.
Right.
They work great together. So, but that might be an option if, some people wanted to. I mean, it depends on how much you're really looking at here. I mean, if you've got 10 people with 8 birds apiece, that's really not very much waste.
Right.
So the best thing is to, use it in your backyard. Spade it into your garden in the spring.
Dr. Weston?
Yes.
Is there a handout? I'm interested in this manure management issue, and is there a handout on how people can utilize the waste in a systematic and proper way?
We've got some fact sheets about that.
You do?
Unfortunately, it's mostly about horse manure.
Yeah,
But can that be,
Yeah, yeah,
can you
well,
extend it to
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly
poultry
with-
waste?
Certainly things about composting, and especially the stuff about composting has a lot of applicability everywhere. I could send you a link to that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I think that would be important for people who may be who want to do poultry husbandry, and then they are not really sure what to do with the waste. That if we can give them a systematic way of disposing, a proper way to dispose of it, it won't end up in my property.
Sure.
in the pinelands
Now,
over
back
there.
to you've got some birds. Anybody else have birds? Do you have birds?
Yeah, we have some.
You have some? Do you have a roosting area? How do you do things? Nesting box for, okay.
I use actually the leaves that I pick up in the fall as their nesting area, nesting stuff. We're already right off the bat composting. When I clean that out, I take it back to the compost pile, and it's all stuff that belongs there.
So you compost it and then you use it back on garden, or what do you
Right
do?
now, I just have a big compost pile. I have not actually reintroduced it to my yard, but I got some nice black gold there.
Okay. What do? You guys?
We have a compost pile, yeah. We haven't put it on the vegetable garden yet, because we haven't had it that long.
Okay.
But, yeah,
Okay.
it doesn't seem to be a problem.
And did you? have some?
We used to, but the township got us.
Where did the attention going?
When we got in trouble for the peacock chickens. A couple of years ago.
Okay. I didn't know.
Okay, now I'll say this about, I kind of alluded to this a second ago, but management's key. Meaning you can manage on a fairly small, limited acreage if you do everything right. You know, you don't need to have 50 acres for your birds. You could have just a fraction of an acre, and you could have some birds on it. So that's some of the things you'll have to think about. Lot size. You know, how big of a lot you've got, you need to have adequate space. Depends on your species a little bit, you know, if you go, like I said earlier, you shouldn't go combining species too much if you can get away from it, at least in the same lots. Humane standards, now I gave that to Doug earlier. And this is something you might want to look at. I don't know, are you familiar with this, Ray? It's the state has standards for animal welfare, okay? It's kind of their minimums, I should say minimum standards. They don't like to use that term, but it's basically a minimum standard for use. And I think it's got standards in there for watering and keeping and fencing and feeding and housing, pretty much everything. And for birds, it's probably got some things in there about, maybe some management practices like, probably not debeaking, I don't know, probably look down on that one, but I'll leave it to Steve. You might want to take a look at it, because I think there's some good management information that's in there. It's about all species. Yep. Biosecurity, I mentioned that a bit ago. Housing, fencing, setbacks, okay, we talked about setbacks a bit already. Housing, and again, that guideline is there, that talks about it. What kind of shelter you need. You need to have some shelter for your animals to keep them out of inclement weather when it happens. And that's probably more so with smaller animals than big animals. You know, cows, they got a couple trees, I think they're probably just about fine. But you really need to consider some kind of shelter. Nuisances, noise. Do you have any nuisance concerns about any noise? No roosters that make noise at 6 a.m. in the morning? None of that? None of that. How close are you to neighbors?
We have an acre lot, so I guess the lots are probably 150 to 200 feet wide.
Okay.
So, and then it's deep.
Yeah, sounds fine. Now, sometimes neighbors have nuisance problems, and sometimes it's not the problem of how you manage it, or sometimes it's the problem of the neighbor. I'm sure that you've seen that happen too, before the neighbor. for whatever reason, has some kind of an issue with what you're doing. Odors, you know, poultry manure, if you don't handle it properly, it can smell, it can stink. But if you're composting it like you mentioned it and keeping it as dry as you can and spreading it back on your lawn or your fertilizer, your gardens, I think that's not going to be a big issue. Okay, there we go. All right, that's the only prepared slides I've got. I do have some handouts, and you'll get those about poultry production, some things we've done at Rutgers, something about biosecurity, and something about egg production. As I mentioned earlier, not really got any guidelines for you in terms of numbers, but if you want to, we can just kind of open the floor up for a little discussion. I think that might be good. I think that, as I mentioned about that, about standards, certainly an acre of land that's well managed, you can have more than 8 birds on it. You can have a lot more than 8 birds on it. I mean, it depends on a little bit on what your township might approve of. Certainly, maybe there's reasons not to do that, but I think you could easily have 20 or 30 birds on an acre without any problem in a residential area.
Some of our residents had concerns about predators.
Well, that's something you probably need to have a plan for, like coyotes or for hawks.
Hawks.
Coyotes mainly.
Coyotes.
Coyotes are probably more of a problem than hawks. Coyotes, yeah.
Well, you know, you can manage. You can put birds can go in a covered coop with chicken wire that goes all around the bird.
Is it important to have the coop raised in an area?
I would be partial to doing that. You know, an area where animals can kind of roost themselves a little bit.
Yeah.
But I don't know that there needs to be a rule about it. I think hawks in some areas that's an issue, but I've seen people who put chicken netting all the way around the areas where so no animal could get to the birds either.
I recycled an old dog run, 6x12 dog run,
Okay.
and then I recycled an old playhouse that I had picked up, when my kids were younger, and they didn't use it anymore, so I put that on the end of the dog run so that they can go up into the house to roost and be out of the elements. Half of my run has a tarp over it, the other half is open.
Okay.
So they've got the best of all, whatever they choose to do, they can do.
Did you keep the slide on the playset?
Nah, I'm gonna be swinging for it now.
That's
You
good.
should try it.
But it's one of those that you see at the Amish build. It's got the small opening in the front. We took that door off, and that's what is butted up against the kennel run. And then on the other side is for us to open up. It's a full 6-foot door, walk in, walk out, do what we got to do, clean it all up, and feed and everything inside there. All their food stays dry.
I think if you're not going to put a cover over the birds, fencing is going to be your key. I go to farms all the time that have predator problems, but
Yeah,
they have fences such that the coyotes don't get in, the animals don't get
Mine's fully enclosed. I've got wire over the top also.
in. Yeah. So I think that appropriate fencing would be important.
We kind of did something similar. We repurposed a trampoline and put chicken wire all the way around it. The trampoline cover's still on the top,
So a lot of that.
they can run around underneath there all day long. They have shade in the summertime. They seem very happy.
Now, those of you that are here, how many of you are using getting eggs?
Well, I have a question about egg production.
Okay. And what's that?
Because the birds are relatively young, but now that it's wintertime, they actually haven't started laying anything.
How old are they?
6 months.
Older.
They're getting close.
They're just about
Yeah, 6, 7 months.
6 or 8 months.
But they say they slow down in the wintertime, but that you can induce the egg production with artificial light. But then I've read other people say that that's not desirable, that it's hard on the birds. You have some input on that?
Yeah, you can induce it with artificial light. Not a poultry scientist, but you can induce it with artificial light. I don't think the amount of stress on them in your situation would be it wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be an issue.
It definitely works, you only need one bulb,
They gotta be happy.
Yeah. That's
one
right.
50-watt bulb, that's all you need.
Okay.
It's only because daylight saving screws them up.
Yeah.
Kind of a light bolt, I guess, what you would call it.
Well, there's not a lot of daylight at this time of year, so.
One of my concerns about the township, going with, going into this and talking about which way they're gonna go with it was, I had heard about building codes and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, mine's not going to be, up to building codes, you know what I mean? I repurposed an old playhouse. It's aesthetically fine, I mean, there's nothing, I mean, I could see some people that had run down, falling down shacks or something like that, but I personally think it's gotta be a case-to-case basis. Again, where I live, even though I'm residential, there's nobody around me that's gonna complain. And if they complain, they're gonna come to me anyway. They ask me when I'm gonna get more animals on the farm. They joke with me all the time.
But you kind of bring up a broader question here, is if you're required to do something, are you gonna have to buy township permits?
Yeah, exactly.
What are you gonna have to do?
Overkill.
Overkill.
I think there's going to be overkill, and I'm hoping that it's not.
Right.
But I mean, I moved out here in Tabernacle 8 years ago to be able to do that. I was in downtown Mount Holly. I couldn't have 8 chickens in downtown Mount Holly. I mean, maybe I could have. I never actually looked into it, but my first chicken was a stray from Mount Holly. It came into my yard when I was living there before I moved here. But, to come here and then find out that we weren't allowed to have them, it was pretty upsetting.
Well, I don't know if this is true, but I was told probably 12 years ago you were allowed. And somebody actually changed it. Have you read anything about that?
I'm not worried about what happens in the rear mirror right now.
Well, it's-
I'm focused on what
That's where
our
our issue was back then.
So, Steve, from your perspective, what are the issues for the township?
I think the only thing, I'll be honest with you, we've got my friend from the Pine Barrens Tribune here, so I don't know if I want to be quoted, so I'm not quite sure I really want to answer the question. So maybe I won't answer the question, I'll respectfully decline. But I will say that I think having this dialogue is really valuable to not only the members of the committee, who will certainly hear it, but also all of us really. And I appreciate coming and just having the dialogue with us more importantly. The one thing I think that people may not necessarily always recognize is that as a Rutgers, and specifically you two gentlemen are a huge asset to our state. And I've known Ray for the better part of 40 years. And I know exactly what he does. And I've served with Ray. I've worked with Ray on a lot of different projects as a cranberry grower. But the nice part about having you here is that we now have a point of contact. We've got a resource. We've got assistance if need be. Because there's a lot of people that are really kind of interested in agriculture in their own little backyard in their own way. And there's a lot of folks, there's a lot of municipalities that are kind of embracing that, and I think that's something that...
That's a big agenda for our current dean.
Yeah, it is.
And
It absolutely
we've
is.
got a whole program in fact, or let's call it urban agriculture, I guess they call it.
Yeah.
Which, I think, it's good.
Yeah, it absolutely is good. But it gives, I think what it does is it connects people to their, they spend a lot of money to buy a lot and buy a house, and it's theirs, it's their home.
Right.
And this is just one piece of that. Not everybody has 4,000 acre chicken farms. Not everybody is are large farmers, but this is an opportunity and for folks to be able to have kind of a connection with agriculture. People really do like farms.
And we want to make it not too onerous for them to do it.
That's right. That's right.
Talking about reconverted buildings, about 7 or 8 years ago, I called like one of the townships to go out to this blueberry farm and identify what he was calling a chicken coop. They thought it was an illegal housing unit because it was in Oklahoma.
I've been on it.
Yeah, so what happened, and we went in there, and there was chickens, like 100 chickens running around, and it cracked me up because I said it reminded me of green acres because the chickens were actually using the bathroom to crap in, going in and out of it. Yeah, it's funny. You've been to
I've been there a couple times. I've taken students there.
That solves our manure problem. Potty train the chicken.
Yeah.
Dr. Westervelt, my name is Joe Barton, I'm on the Township Committee.
Okay.
Have you had a chance to look at the proposed draft ordinance that we?
No, I have not.
Would you mind if we just took a few minutes and went over some things,
Yeah.
and
That's-
would love to hear your comments on,
Sure.
on some of the things.
And I
we're
can,
looking at.
and if I may not have an answer now, I can always-
Okay.
Why don't we,
I think you covered a lot of it, but I'll just go with some of the high points that, so what we're trying to do is regulate the chickens. We have residents that have chickens that are not in compliance with our ordinance. So our ordinance prohibits chickens, so this gentleman has chickens, we want him to be in compliance with the ordinance. So we're trying to create an ordinance that people that have chickens or people who want to have chickens are in compliance with our ordinance. And so that was the reason for the ordinance. It was brought to us from a lot of folks who do have chickens. I want to keep having chickens, I want to be in compliance. And so basically we said, okay, if we're going to have chickens, we don't want any roosters because we don't want the noise. We don't want any resale of the products. We don't want roadside stands in front of someone's home selling eggs or selling chickens. You know, if they want to share them with their neighbors, they're welcome to do that, however they do that. If they want to barter with them, but, you know, we're saying you can't sell poultry products. We do talk about enclosures, and specifically, let's see, we talk about minimum lot size, that and most lots in Tabernacle are greater than a half acre. So we have it in this ordinance, I think we're going to say 3/4 acres. We originally in this ordinance identified 9 female chickens on an acre. No roosters, no slaughtering of chickens in public view. No running at large of the chickens. No disturbing of the peace. The animals have to be free of sickness and disease, and we referenced that if there is a problem, they go to an animal control officer. We didn't mention what you did. As far as structures and enclosures, you know, we say that the chickens shall be provided a fully enclosed shelter with a fenced enclosure outside and completely apart from any building used wholly and apart from dwelling purposes. Shelters and enclosures shall be located in the rear yard. We did take this draft ordinance, we gave it to our Land Development Board to make sure it was consistent with the master plan. They said it did, and they came back with a whole list of comments also. And basically, their comments were that if we have accessory buildings in Tabernacle that have to be behind the front principal use, and there's a size requirement, and there's setbacks for side yard and rear yard. And so basically, the Land Development Board said, you know, we'd like to see these enclosures in that envelope so that they don't encroach in the side yard and rear yard setbacks. So we'll probably look at that. And in this case, we had said those should be located at least 30 feet from any residential structure or adjoining property. Now, this was before the Land Development Board gave us their comments. Shelters shall not exceed 60 square feet in size or 8 feet in height, which is probably more than enough to keep 9 chickens.
What's enough for 9 chickens?
Fences shall not exceed 6 feet. Floors on all coops, runs, and surrounding areas of all places shall be kept clean and dry at all times and subject to periodic inspection by a health officer. Coops and runs shall be disinfected or otherwise treated. Shelters and enclosures shall not be used after construction for storage of any other purpose or use other than to keeping the chickens. So if you build a coop and you abandon the chicken someday, you know, it doesn't mean you can use it to put your garden, your lawnmower, your snow blower. You can't use it as an accessory building is what we're saying. Then we go into manure storage. Shall be located at least 100 linear feet from water, which meets the state requirement, right? Then we said land application of animal waste shall be performed in accordance with the NJDA best practice, which is what you referenced, so we're consistent there. Manure applied to the soil can be applied to soil rated not to exceed 200 pounds per 1,000 square feet.
Yeah, I've got something that's in that document that says what I recommend, and I forget what it is. It's,
Okay, and manure shall be incorporated into the soil, not used on the surface of the soil. And waste removal, all droppings, fecal matter shall be removed weekly, leaf coop and shall be removed from the premise or otherwise disposed of. And that's pretty much the ordinance that we wrote, which sounds like it's consistent with the presentation.
so you'd say your biggest issue is what, shelter? Is that kind of the biggest thing?
The
They don't want
location
the
of the
free
site.
range ones. You mentioned you didn't want free range chickens.
Right.
Because there is a lot of people that think
Yeah.
that's the way to go.
How about if somebody wanted to do a, what they call a chicken tractor? It's an enclosure with wheels that they move every day to a different port in their lawn. Now, the birds are still.
Joe's deal?
Joe's
Yeah,
deal.
right.
And you can move them, you might be able, you have it on wheels, it's easy to move it. And since we want to promote grazing, I mean, from the birds, to be able to pick out grass and eat it and get the bugs and the grit. That way you probably have to add a little bit less feed. You can, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's kind
The
of,
only question
it's kind of
is-
a movable coop is what it
Yeah.
is.
So did you
The
call
only-
that chicken track?
Chicken tractors, what some people would call
Tractors.
it, yeah. And they can, you go on the internet, you'll find them that are, the size of this room almost. But, we're talking ones that are, about the size of this table.
The only thought I had in that, Mike, was the fact that we're here in the Pine Barrens. Acid soil is very drouthy, very dry. And, nice pastures and grass that would be in Hunterton isn't going to be.
You're not gonna have as much.
Yeah, it's going to be much thinner, and a lot of areas you could hardly even grow grass. Is that correct, Steve?
Yes.
Yeah.
And one of the concerns we heard was that because we have an acidic, well-draining soil, sandy soil, that that manure would be a major issue and perk down to the aquifer. That was some of the feedback we received.
It's low cation.
Yeah, I would say if you're not over applying, that's not too much of an issue. Phosphorus is probably not gonna, it's gonna die out. It's either nitrogen maybe.
Yeah, now, one thing you mentioned, which is not in this ordinance, was 50 feet from the wellhead.
I'd have to check that. I'm not sure what, it might be 25, but I'll have to look that up. I think it's 50, but I know it's in another document. Not in this.
Other than that, your presentation, was excellent, and, I saw, as you were going through the presentation and all the bullet points, I was kind of looking for where we stood with the ordinance, and it looks like it matches up pretty close.
What do you farmers think about it?
Mr. Barton, I know this is a totally losing battle, but why are we so against male chickens, roosters?
The noise.
Okay, but what about the person that's got 6 acres, 10 acres? What about somebody like me that's not going to bother anybody? I mean, there's got to be a way that we could still allow one rooster in a farm or something like that. Obviously, you're not going to have it on Holly Park, but you got to. To me, it's a common sense thing, and I know that there was problems in the past, but I just think it's sad that, somebody that comes out here and has 3 acres, that's really far from their neighbors, if there's no complaints, why can't we have them?
I think it's a...
There is no danger, there is no...
Maybe a phased approach that we deal with this and maybe look to the future.
I think outlawing it altogether is just crazy.
Well, that's something we could talk about when we have this with
Okay, well, I didn't
30
know
other people here.
if it should all be done at one time, or if you can...
Yeah,
work
Mike
on it
is just
after.
really here, just kind of have some dialogue
I
about,
like the idea
about
of
taking care of chickens.
leaving some flexibility in there that, maybe this individual, because of their management, where they are.
I mean, telling you where you
Yeah,
guys heard my story where I came from. I taught my children how to raise them. I brought eggs in the house that were fertilized and incubated them, and it was a project. Our local schools asked me to bring my chickens in to show to the kindergarten classrooms up through 2nd grade. I mean, there's a lot more to it than just the noise.
We can look into it. I mean, as the mayor said, you live in a residential home, but we have areas, different zones. We have forest zone, we have the agriculture zone. we have the residential zones, different residential growth zones, which clearly, on that side of town is all purely residential. But if you're in the forest or the agriculture zone and you're residential use and you are surrounded, we could talk about that. We're just concerned about, like where I live in Fox Chase. Those homes are 1 acre. I have woods in back of me all the way to Southampton, so there's no one in back of me. And where Mrs. Brooks lives, it wouldn't be a problem where she lives. I've been to her property. I mean, nobody could hear a rooster from her property, but clearly from mine, I have a neighbor 3 doors down that has a dog that he runs sleds on through the woods. And, every time the deer comes down the back of the property, we hear them dogs. I'm not complaining about that. I'm not complaining about that, but I think if I had a rooster next door to me.
Yeah, that was one of the things, though. I mean, you talk about noises, like you said, dogs can be noisier.
Yeah.
There are other things too. It's just, I felt like when I realized that they were banned practically in Tabernacle, I'm like, this is really crazy.
Because, I mean, the
This is
next
something
thing,
that
I'm sure someone's going to say, I want to have ducks. We're starting with chickens.
Or a goat.
Yeah, we're
Are we not
going.
allowed to have them?
No.
I would think a goat would probably
Not
be
residential.
the easiest.
Again,
Do you have people with pot-bellied pigs? And you don't even know it? I bet you do.
We probably do, but again, they're not permitted use. When I moved here in the late 70s, I had a neighbor 2 doors down on an acre of land, put 2 horses on there. Now, since then, Tabernacle has a horse ordinance, and we regulate where those horses. Now, that property was grandfathered, but they had sold it, so fortunately, those 2 horses aren't there anymore. But they did take a big look at this, and I remember how contentious it was, because I was on the zoning board at the time. And we got it right. We got the ordinance right, so people can have horses in town, provided you live on more than an acre of land, and depending on where that acre is.
How did you arrive at the 8 birds? That just...
We were given a presentation, I have a copy of it here, and a
That
group...
was local, what surrounding towns around.
8 birds
here.
are in
What's
Bedford.
surrounding
That's
townships?
in
well,
Bedford. Yeah, that's a neighboring town.
This is the
ordinance.
ordinances that surrounding towns have, and that was kind of the number they came up with. And when we heard residents like this gentleman speak, they were kind of in that number. They weren't looking to have 30, 40, 50 chickens.
No, but I am still looking for 12 or more, right? I mean, I wouldn't go up to 30, but if you gave me 12, I would love to do 12. I mean, again, it should be on a case-by-case basis. If you have the area for it, if everything's set up right, if you have the coop and the pen for it, and it should be kind of case by case, which I know is hard to do.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have to write the ordinance
You can't.
for everyone and protect those that are on congested areas so that someone doesn't have too many chickens in that area.
But then again, yourself, you said that you're going with 3/4 of an acre to start this ordinance. If 3/4 of an acre had 8 and myself at 2 acres can have 12, that seems like a no-brainer to me.
Oh, so you're saying
You're scaling it.
density dependent?
It should be, yeah, it should be.
Could you say something like, 12 birds per acre, and then if he has 2, he could have more than that, or
Well,
something like that? make any
I'm not
sense?
looking for 30
Yeah, let me
acres,
help
30 birds.
everybody understand where we are. We have a draft ordinance. We sent that ordinance to the Land Development Board for their comments. They've given our comments back. The committee will meet to decide whether they want to incorporate those comments or make any other
Or not.
changes, right, Mayor?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a working document. It's not set in stone yet. So the committee will work with it. There'll be public comment on what the final product is. And then if the committee majority is in favor, we'll have an ordinance, and it'll hopefully be the best work product we can make.
No pigs, huh?
Well, if anybody else has any other questions for Mike, I want to join me in thanking Mike for coming tonight.
I have been in touch with him.
Yeah.
5 years.
Yeah, yeah,
He used to send me pictures of those.
It was 3 acres, that's what it looked like.
And you know, the thing about him is he was so
Yeah. Yeah.
he threw it at the mayor and he said, see my big one?
Oh, I had a better one than that.
Thank you for the presentation. And right off the bat, we never met. Thank you for coming out.
Yeah, how long have you been here? Long time, since you were baby.
Well, we lived in this house.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in Medford town.